I seen the fire and I seen the reflection. I don't know who you are, but I'm gonna ask you to leave.
Okay, I can leave. No problem.
Did you receive any money for testifying or providing information in the Stanley Liggins case?
He told me he loved me
Why was that unusual?
because we weren't like that then. There was no love.
Lies of omission and commission formed a tapestry of deception in the courtroom Thursday. Stanley Liggins has been accused of sexually abusing 3 girls during the 1.5 years he lived in the Quad Cities. But jurors hearing testimony in Liggins' ongoing trial in the murder of Jennifer Lewis will never hear about those other girls. Some argue jurors are being protected from overly prejudicial information, while others countered they are being denied evidence of a pattern of behavior. But first, let's hear from Wanda Hughes, a star witness for the prosecution. She's testified Thursday she went into the kitchen of her boyfriend's house for a glass of water and glanced out the window.
I went back to get something to drink. I had left my glass of water sitting there. That's what it was. I went back and got the water, got ready to turn away, but I seen something else.
What else did you see?
I seen the fire and I seen the reflection. That had been many years ago. Of a car.
And when you were looking, where did you see the car?
I seen the car sitting for me to be raised up in the area, I had to sit there and think. I was raised on Nathan. And that would have been, you know what? That would have been Warren Street then. Let's see, let me make sure now. No, that would have been Vine come around through there, around that curve.
Is it the road in front of Jefferson that curves
Yeah.
around?
It goes around by the Friendly House and
That's been identified as Vine Street?
no, that's not Vine. That'd have been, yeah, that would have been Vine. That would have been Vine if I,
Okay, so where did you see the car then?
it was sitting on the 10th,
So you
10th and Vine.
So you were looking out the window and you saw the car at 10th and Vine?
Yeah, because I be looking down towards the hill on Vine. I'll be looking,
And you were still looking out the window at Horses
yeah,
or Oak, as you call them?
yeah.
And what part of the car did you see?
I cannot say who was driving the car, but I can tell you what the lights look like,
Okay, and what lights? The front lights or the back lights?
the back lights.
Okay. And what was remarkable about the lights?
It was, back then I wasn't a driver, so it was, the brake light and the redness around them. One light was brighter than the other one.
Wanda Hughes has been a pivotal figure in the Stanley Liggins case from the beginning. In both his 1993 and 1995 trials, prosecutors unveiled the back half of Stanley Liggins' car in the courtroom and turned on the taillights while Wanda Hughes testified that those were indeed the lights she saw from a block away. In both cases, juries voted to convict. But Wanda Hughes is a reason this case is being retried a third time, 28 years after 9-year-old Jennifer Lewis's burning corpse was found on an Iowa school playground. An Iowa appellate court threw out Liggins' conviction and granted him a new trial after it was learned that a prosecution witness had been a paid police informant in 87 other cases. The court didn't identify the witness because she was an informant. but I suspected it was Wanda, so I knocked on her door 2 years ago when I began this investigation. She spoke to me on her porch while someone was mowing her front yard.
My boyfriend lived right across the street, just like Jefferson said here, he lived about, I say about 50 yards to 100 yards away from where they found that baby. And like I said, his name was Oak, Forster. That's the way it sounds. But the thing of it was, he was talking to me about it. It was a fire out there, and I was laying on the couch watching TV. And you know, I started not to say nothing about it, but I said I had kids of my own, and I started to myself, it would kill me dead if something happened to one of my babies. Then my health done got so bad as shit.
Then what got so bad?
My health, you know, my health done got so bad. I can't, sometimes I remember I can sit and think about things, then I can it'll come back to me, then, but I have more days I can't find my way.
Okay. Well, you saw the lights, you didn't think anything of it at the time because you just saw some lights in the fire.
Right.
But then when you heard there was a murder, when did you go and tell the police about it?
I think it was almost, maybe 2 weeks, maybe a week or two. I said between a week or two.
Okay.
Might have been a little longer. But I tell you, Oak talked to him first. They talked to Oak. Oak said this to him. I don't want to be involved.
How does he spell his last name?
Just like it sounds. O-A-K.
Okay.
His first name was Horser. Just
Yep.
like a horse.
Hey, his first name was Horse?
Uh-huh.
Horse? Man?
Oak. It was Oak Forsel. Just like a horse.
Horse?
Uh-huh.
H-O-R-S-E.
That's it.
That's Oak Horse.
Yeah, that's the way his name is. And
Is he alive still, or?
no, he died.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, he died. Me and him was good friends. And he thought about that. That bothered Oak too for a long time. His whole world changed after that.
Did you know anybody down at the Davenport police when you went down there?
No. No more than no. No, I didn't. I didn't know no. Oak didn't know nobody, and I didn't either.
Do you think? Do you have any idea who did it? Just that you saw the lights.
I don't have no idea who did it. I don't have no more idea who did it, and from what I said, I didn't. I just seen the light, the car light, the tail light. No, we'll forget that though.
You'd given some information on other things to the police over the years, though, before that, didn't you?
But no,
No?
no,
No, okay.
no.
Okay.
No, I talked to the officer, only when I talked to the officer when we went out of town. And that was when they had the trial on him. That was the end of that.
That was the last time you talked to somebody, is when you went up to Davenport?
That's the only time, but that's the last time I spoke to anyone. And I don't know, I'm gonna put that, what do you say you do now?
I'm writing a book on the case, and
I think you lying.
why?
Because it don't sound like, you asked me a lot of questions. What is,
Well, that's what reporters do.
yeah, but I don't want to be involved in it no more. I mean, I can't remember and half of it, and it's been so long, and my,
Do you remember well enough that you could testify again in February?
no, I don't know. Probably so, I don't know. I really don't know. My memory ain't that good. I didn't know there wasn't nothing coming up in February.
Well, they moved the trial. He got a new trial, and he's going to be going on trial in February.
Well, good luck. That's all I can say.
Did you know a detective named Don Schaefer?
I don't think so.
How about Kevin Murphy?
Now, I think I do know a Kevin. Didn't he go to the penitentiary or something?
Well, he got in some trouble, but he didn't go.
Oh.
You think about that night very much anymore?
Who?
You think about that day much anymore?
Not anymore. I don't remember. You know, I don't think about too much of nothing anymore. When you remember, you just stay sick all the time. You're worried about your health, not just nobody else. You worry about yourself trying to live.
I hear you.
Yeah.
That's a good-looking corgi there.
Yeah, my baby. Oh! He came through. Maybe on that tree over there. Boy, Bill is a big one with a big old white tail.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know who you are, but I'm gonna ask you to leave.
okay, I can leave. No problem.
So, as you can see, Wanda told me she wasn't an informant in any other police cases. On Thursday, she testified that she was such an informant. Not just once or twice, but 87 times. And she was paid by undercover officers working for both the Davenport Police Department and also a multi-agency narcotics unit. The defense will almost certainly ask the question, what are the odds the eyewitness in this case was somebody already on the police payroll? Don Schaefer, who led the investigation of Jennifer Lewis's murder, said he was unaware that she was an undercover informant. Hughes said she did not advertise that fact.
Did you ever tell Elaine or John Gross that you were a witness in the Stanley Liggins case?
No,
Did you ever tell either one of them that you were involved at all in the Stanley Liggins case?
no,
Did you ever tell any of the detectives involved in the Stanley Liggins case that you were a confidential source?
no,
Did you ever tell Bill Davis, the county attorney Bill Davis, did you ever tell county attorney Bill Davis that you were a confidential source?
no. When some you tell, you get your head busted.
Did you receive any money for testifying or providing information in the Stanley Liggins case?
No, no, no.
So, significant new information was revealed in the trial that Wanda Hughes was a paid police informant. But it is also significant what remained hidden from the ears of jurors. Stanley Liggins' girlfriend in 1990 testified Thursday.
Did he say anything to you that struck you as unusual?
Yes.
What did he say?
He told me he loved me
Why was that unusual?
because we weren't like that then. There was no love.
Had he said that to you before?
No.
As far as that he loved you, did he say anything else in connection with that?
He asked me, would I love him no matter what?
And did you find the question, would you love him no matter what, unusual?
I did.
And why?
Because it just wasn't like that. And there was no love.
On the next day, so after that, what did you do? After he came home at midnight, what did you do?
Went to sleep.
Did you and Mr. Liggins sleep together that night?
No.
Can you account for his whereabouts that night after you went to sleep?
No.
At some point, did you get up in the middle of the night or early next morning?
I did.
And explain that, what did you do?
I went out to the car to get something.
What car are we talking about?
The Peugeot.
The Peugeot?
Yes.
Whose Peugeot was it?
It was both of ours.
Can you describe the car?
It was brownish. It was
I'm going to show you what's been admitted into exhibit. It states exhibit 104.
reddish.
You recognize what's depicted in States 104?
I do.
That the Peugeot that you and Mr. Liggins purchased?
Yes.
And in States 86A, recognize what's depicted in States 86A?
Yes.
And that's the same car,
Yes.
then somewhat modified to fit in the courtroom?
Yes.
When was the Peugeot purchased?
It was April of 1990.
I'm going to show you what's been marked in States Exhibit 92. Is that what's called the odometer reading for the purchase of the Peugeot?
Yes.
States Exhibit 93 and 94, are those the purchase documents for the Peugeot?
Yes.
This time I've moved to admit States Exhibits 92, 93, and 94.
Any objection?
None, Your Honor.
Exhibits 92, 93, and 94 are admitted.
And those would show that the Peugeot was purchased in April 1990.
Yes.
And those documents are signed by you and in your name, is that correct?
Yes.
Except for 94, which has Mr. Liggins' name on it.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Who paid for the Peugeot?
Both of us paid for it.
Who drove the Peugeot primarily?
Stanley. Stanley.
Stanley? What about in the month of September? At that time, who would have been driving it primarily?
Stanley.
I believe we were talking about 2 a.m. on the 18th of September. You went out and you got something from the car.
Yes.
Did you go back in and go to sleep then?
Yes.
Again, were you and Mr. Liggins together at that time? Sleep together?
No.
Separate rooms?
Yes.
When did you next see Mr. Liggins then?
In the morning.
He was there in the morning?
Yes.
And what time did you guys get up?
It was before 8.
What did you do?
I took him back to the hillside.
So you got in the car and went, drove it at about 8 that morning?
Yes.
Did you notice anything unusual about the car?
Yes, I did.
And what was that?
Gas fumes.
Gas fumes?
Correct.
Was that unusual for that car?
Yes.
Had that car recently been cleaned?
Yes.
And who cleaned the car?
Stanley and me.
You both cleaned it? When in relation to the 17th, which was a Monday, when would you cleaned it?
Saturday, I believe.
And who cleaned the inside of it on Saturday?
I did.
Did you use any water to clean it on Saturday?
No, I didn't.
The interior?
No.
What did you use?
Armor All.
And who washed the outside?
Stanley.
While this revelation seemed to interest some jurors, I was struck by what jurors were not hearing. In an earlier deposition, the girlfriend testified that Liggins had sexually abused her then 3-year-old daughter. Here's what she testified to in the deposition. Nobody can coax her because there was nobody that would have. So, she was a child and she used the word peeper. She said Stanley put his peeper in my mouth and then washed it off with a washcloth. That he peed in her mouth and washed it off with the washcloth. I know she didn't mean pee. And she said he washed it off, then took her to the store for candy. Retired Rock Island County Circuit Judge Casey Single said when he was an assistant state's attorney, he opted not to prosecute this case because of the victim's tender age and the certainty that Liggins would serve a life sentence in Iowa for Jennifer Lewis's murder. But Stanley Liggins was convicted of sexually abusing a Milan, Illinois girl 1 month before Jennifer Lewis's homicide. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison, which he has now served. But last year, Judge Marlita Grieve denied a prosecution motion to introduce the prior sex abuse conviction to show a pattern of behavior. Assistant County Attorney Julie Walton questioned the victim's mother last year.
At some point, did you guide AS out of the courtroom during that trial in the spring of 1991?
Yes.
And did something remarkable occur as you were guiding AS out of the courtroom?
Yes.
Can you describe for the court what occurred as you were guiding AS out of the courtroom?
Stanley Liggins threatened to kill my daughter.
Prosecutors Mike and Julie Walton argue that Stanley Liggins learned his lesson after he got arrested for sexually abusing AS.
We also intend, with regard to motive and intent, the fact that less than a month, a little over a month after the AS allegations in which the defendant was arrested and he was out on bond for, a little over a month after those allegations, Mr. Liggins lured Jennifer away and murdered her. And it was clear that that was done based on what he had learned August 3rd of 1990, because AS, you'll see from the transcript, screamed, ran for help, and was able to talk to the police and identify Mr. Liggins and what he had done to her, and the police arrested him. So on September 17th of 1990, Mr. Liggins wasn't going to let that happen again. So rather than choose to attack a little girl near her own home and around her friends, he lured her away in his vehicle and he murdered her so that this little girl couldn't talk.
But the court found that admitting the prior conviction would be overly prejudicial in this case.
I'm Benjamin Payne with WVIK Quad Cities NPR. I'm speaking with reporter Scott Reeder. He is covering the criminal retrial of Stanley Liggins in Waterloo, Iowa. Scott, thank you for joining me.
Hey, it's terrific to be here, Ben.
So, I understand we had a number of interesting witnesses on the stand for Thursday. Could you tell us about that?
Well, yes, we had a couple of really interesting witnesses. One of them was Stanley Liggins's girlfriend from that era of 27, 28 years ago. And another one was a woman who was a key eyewitness in the case. She was also happened to be an undercover police informant, and the fact that she was a paid police informant in other cases was never disclosed to the defense, and that is why the Iowa Appellate Court threw out the last conviction, and why we're going through this trial a third time. So she testified as well. So they both were really interesting cases.
And what did his older girlfriend have to say?
Well, she talked about the day of the Jennifer's death, getting in the car the next day, and the car she owned with her boyfriend, Stanley, smelled like gasoline, and she was quite concerned about that. And of course, in hindsight, Jennifer was doused with gasoline and set on fire in a school playground in Davenport, so that could be a critical piece of evidence.
And what about the police informant?
Well, let me tell you a little bit more about this girlfriend, because we aren't using her name. You'll understand here in a minute why. The defense was pretty rough on her. I mean, you could tell when she came in, she was not making eye contact, and she truly loathes Stanley Liggins. And the defense attorney says, "Now, didn't you contracted a sexually transmittable disease from Stanley, didn't you? And she says, yes. And then he goes, and he was the only person who could have given it to you, wasn't he? Yes. So it kind of gives the jurors the impression this is why she doesn't like him. And I would suspect that would be a real downer for any relationship. But here's what didn't come out in the trial. I went and, since this is the advantage of having been researching this case for 2 years, I remembered that she had given a deposition a number of years ago about this. And she made the assertion that Stanley Liggins had sexually assaulted her 3-year-old daughter. And let me read a little bit from the deposition, if you don't mind, Ben.
Oh, that's fine.
This is her quoting her 3-year-old daughter. She said, and nobody can coax her because there's nobody who would coax her. So while I was at work, Stanley and she, the child, and she used the word peeper, said, Stanley put his peeper in my mouth and then washed it off with a washcloth. That he peed in her mouth and he washed it off with a washcloth. I know she didn't mean pee. And she said he washed it off and took me to a store for candy. Now, that's pretty graphic stuff. And this is one of the frustrating parts about this trial. I mean, this is an assertion that was made by a child about what happened to her when she was 3 years old. And yet, this is not coming up in the trial of Jennifer Lewis. And you can ask, well, why isn't this coming up? I mean, this is a story about a child that was 9-year-old girl who was abducted, sexually assaulted, strangled, dumped in a school playground, doused with gasoline, and set on fire. You think, well, wouldn't it be particularly telling if the person accused of this crime had harmed other children? But for some reason, this is not coming up. And we know also a month before before Jennifer Lewis was killed, that Stanley Liggins was arrested for sexually abusing another child, another 9-year-old girl. And he was then released on bond, and Jennifer was killed during this period when Stanley was out on bond. Now, eventually he was convicted in this crime. So this isn't even an allegation anymore. This is a fact. He's been convicted of sexually abusing a 9-year-old girl. But the judge has ruled that that information cannot come into this trial because it's unduly prejudicial. The prosecution tried to argue that this is a sign of a pattern. Well, I don't know about you, Ben, but usually the best indication of future behavior is past behavior. Those of us who are married, we found out whether we wanted to marry this person because we watched their behavior while we were dating to know if that was somebody we wanted to marry. If we're looking for somebody to hire, we check references because we want to see what their past behavior was, just get an idea of what their future behavior will be as an employee. And yet, critical information like this is not being heard by jurors. So, I thought, to be fair, I'd go up to the defense attorney and ask him after the trial, hey, this never came up in the trial today, but in the deposition that was done with this girlfriend a number of years ago, she made this assertion that Stanley Liggins had sexually abused her daughter. I said, I want to give him an opportunity to say, I didn't do it, or I did it, or whatever. And he just the defense attorney looks at me and says, yeah, but the jurors never hear about that. Who on earth is glib about the sexual assault of a 3-year-old child? But that's how that defense attorney came off. And that's troubling to me.
Mm-hmm.
And by
And
the
was
way,
that-
he also
yeah.
said he couldn't comment on the assertion at all.
hmm And was that piece of information the one that Liggins was convicted of abusing that other 9-year-old girl? Was that piece of information withheld from past trials of Liggins in this murder trial of Jennifer Lewis?
I want to say yes, it was.
Okay. And I'm just curious, how far in advance are these information that's withheld from the jury? We have this. We also have the fact that Liggins was involved in providing Lewis's family, some of her family members, with cocaine. How far in advance is this information is it determined that it will be withheld from the jury?
Well, it's in the case of the cocaine, it was decided more than 25 years ago. It was decided by the Iowa Supreme Court. It came out in the first trial, and the Iowa Supreme Court said, no, that's unduly prejudicial. We're throwing out the conviction. So that was decided long, long ago. As far as his past behavior, I believe it was about a year ago, or a little over a year ago, that the local judge ruled that no, that couldn't come in, as even if you're arguing that this is a pattern of behavior on the part of Stanley Liggins. So it varies a great deal. Sometimes the judge will make a decision right there in the courtroom on what can or can't come in. But on these bigger decisions, these things have been made long in advance of the trial.
And what about the paid police informant who testified? What did she have to say?
Well, her name is Wanda Hughes. It feels great to be able to identify her now. When we were working, when VIK and I were working on the podcast last year, we held off on identifying her because it hadn't come out in open court, her identity. And now it's come out in open court that this woman who looked out the window of a house of a man she was dating about a block to 2 blocks away from the fire saw taillights, and she went to the police and said, I saw taillights near that fire scene. Now, one of the things to remember is she came forward about 2 weeks after the fact, which is troubling to me. I mean, if you've heard that a child was killed, wouldn't you come forward right away? But the reason we're having our third trial right now is because it was never disclosed to the defense that this woman had been an undercover paid police informant in more than 80 cases involving the Davenport Police Department or affiliated agencies. And that the Iowa Appellate Court said is unacceptable. That needed to be disclosed, and that's why they threw out the second conviction, in part. So about 2 years ago, I just went and knocked on her door, and I said, we two of us sat down on a swing sat down on a porch, and we started talking, and she told me about what she saw, and then I started asking her questions like, so Wanda, did you have a relationship with anybody at the police department before all this? Oh no. And I just kind of kept pushing her a little bit, and finally she got mad at me and said, I want you to leave, and kicked me off the porch. And of course, now we know that she indeed was a paid police informant involving this case, and or not involving this case, but involving a lot of other cases. We also know that she said she was not paid anything to testify in this particular case. But it raises questions for folks. I mean, what are the odds the person who just happened to look out the window of her house and saw a fire and saw taillights also happened to be a person already on the police payroll and helping them out with various investigations? I mean, that's a troubling thing. You know, we may never know the answer to that.
And did the defense press this informant, Wanda Hughes, on why she took 2 weeks to report that she saw the taillight?
No, they really didn't. And this is a humorous thing that happened in the courtroom. The defense asked her, have you talked to anybody else in law enforcement about this? Has anybody else talked to you about this case? And this woman, she's in her, I would guess, in her late 50s, maybe her mid 50s, and she's lost most of her eyesight. She looks up and she points her finger at the back pew in the courtroom and says, "I talked to him. I talked to him." And everybody, all the jurors are looking around. Who's she pointing at? And all the people in the audience are looking around, and I'm looking around, and then it suddenly dawns on me, she's pointing at me. And I look back at her and she says, "Yeah, you! Raise your hand! Raise your hand!" So I kind of timidly raised my hand, and she's looking at me and pointing at me, and it was the funniest thing. The judge, the prosecutors, and the defense attorneys just moved the trial right along like nothing had happened there, and that was kind of the end of it. But I don't think it's usually a good thing when a witness points at you from the witness stand.
No. So is there anything else you want to mention about Thursday's proceedings?
I thought my sense on it was the prosecution finally started to get some momentum in their case. It felt like things were starting to click for them, and it was starting to register with the jurors what the prosecution's case was. It seemed to be clicking along pretty well. Of course, the challenge is, last weekend was a 3-day weekend. This weekend's a 3-day weekend. The judge's daughter's getting married on Saturday, so there's not going to be court on Friday. So the jurors are going to have 3 days to take off, and then we come back on Monday. It'll be interesting to see if the prosecution can maintain that momentum going into the next week.
Excellent. All right, Scott, thank you for joining me.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Ben.
Mens rea is the legal principle of intent that must be proved in a number of crimes, such as murder. It means literally, the guilty mind. The Mens Rea podcast explores the most notorious crimes from Ireland and the UK, and the court cases that followed. Every fortnight, a new case is discussed. So if you like hard-hitting, in-depth true crime podcasts, head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from, and subscribe to the Mens Rea podcast today.